The basement door had been locked for 7 years. 7 years of marriage, and Stephen Bell had never once questioned it. His wife, Hannah, had been clear from the beginning. That door stays locked. Always. It's just storage, she had said. Old furniture, family junk, nothing important. And Stephen, being the trusting husband he was, had never pushed. But tonight, everything changed. It was 2:47 a.m. when Stephen woke to an empty bed. His hand reached across the cool sheets where Hannah should have been. She was gone. Again. This was the 4th night this week. He sat up slowly, his heart already beginning to race. The house in suburban Seattle was silent, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Through the half-open bedroom door, he could hear something, a muffled sound, like crying. Or was it laughing? He couldn't tell. Stephen stood and moved toward the hallway. The floor was cold beneath his bare feet. As he reached the top of the staircase, he froze. A thin line of light glowed from beneath the basement door. The door that was always locked. His stomach twisted. Hannah was down there, in the one place she had forbidden him from entering for 7 years. Questions flooded his mind. What was she doing? Why now in the middle of the night? And most terrifying of all, what had she been hiding from him all these years? Stephen descended the stairs slowly, each step careful and deliberate. The closer he got to the basement door, the clearer the sounds became. It was crying. Soft, broken sobs. Hannah's sobs. Before we continue with this gripping story, I need you to do something for me. Please, take just 1 second and hit that subscribe button. It means everything to me and helps me bring you more stories like this one. Also, smash that like button so others can discover this channel, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Your support keeps this channel alive. Now, let's dive back into Stephen and Hannah's shocking secret. Stephen stood inches from the basement door. His hand trembled as it reached for the doorknob. He hesitated. Part of him didn't want to know. Part of him wanted to turn around, go back to bed, and pretend he'd never woken up. But he couldn't. Not anymore. Not after hearing his wife cry like that. He turned the knob. It was unlocked. The door opened with a slow creak. Warm air rushed up from below, carrying with it a strange smell. Not unpleasant, but unfamiliar, like lavender mixed with something metallic. Stephen started down the wooden stairs. Each step groaned under his weight. Hannah didn't seem to notice. She was too focused on whatever she was doing. When Stephen reached the bottom, he stopped breathing. The basement was nothing like he'd imagined. It wasn't filled with old furniture or family junk. Instead, the entire space had been transformed into something else entirely. The walls were painted soft blue. String lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, gentle glow. And in the center of the room stood a hospital-style bed. On that bed lay a woman Stephen had never seen before. Hannah sat beside the bed, holding the woman's hand. She was wiping the woman's face with a damp cloth, speaking softly to her. "It's okay, Mom. I'm here. I'm always here." Stephen's knees nearly gave out. Mom? Hannah's mother had died 15 years ago. He'd been told this story many times. Car accident. Quick. Painless. Hannah rarely spoke about it, and when she did, her eyes would fill with tears. Stephen had always assumed it was too painful for her to revisit. But now, standing in this hidden basement room, staring at a woman who looked eerily like an older version of Hannah, Stephen realized he'd been lied to. For 7 years. Hannah finally noticed him. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock and fear. "Stephen," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to be down here. What is this?" Stephen's voice came out shaky, barely above a whisper. "Who is she?" Hannah stood slowly, her hands shaking. "This is my mother." Stephen felt the room spin. "Your mother? Hannah, you told me she died." "I know what I told you," Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. "I lied." The word hung in the air like poison. Stephen staggered backward, leaning against the wall for support. "You lied. For 7 years you've been lying to me." "I can explain," Hannah said desperately. "Can you?" Stephen's voice rose, anger mixing with confusion. "Can you explain why you've kept your mother locked in our basement? Can you explain why you told me she was dead? Can you explain any of this? Hannah moved toward him, but Stephen stepped back. Don't, he said. Just tell me what's happening. Hannah took a deep breath, wiping her eyes. My mother isn't dead, Stephen, but she's not alive either. Not really. Stephen's confusion deepened. What does that mean? 15 years ago, my mother was in a car accident, Hannah began, her voice trembling. She didn't die, but she was severely injured. Brain damage. The doctors said she'd never wake up. She's been in a vegetative state ever since. Stephen looked at the woman on the bed. She lay perfectly still, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with slow, mechanical breaths. My father couldn't handle it, Hannah continued. He wanted to pull the plug, let her go. But I couldn't. She's my mother, Stephen. I couldn't just let her die. So you've been taking care of her? Stephen asked. For 15 years? Hannah nodded. My father died 6 years ago, heart attack. Before he died, he made me promise I'd finally let her go. But I couldn't. So when we got married, I brought her here. Stephen ran his hands through his hair, his mind struggling to process everything. Hannah, this is insane. You can't just keep someone hidden in a basement. I had no choice, Hannah said defensively. If I'd put her in a facility, they would have asked questions. They would have wanted to know why I was keeping her alive when there was no hope. They might have forced me to end life support. So instead you hid her from everyone? From me? I wanted to tell you, Hannah said, her voice breaking. So many times I almost did. But I was scared. Scared you'd think I was crazy. Scared you'd leave me. Stephen felt tears forming in his own eyes. Hannah, I married you. I promised to be there for you through everything. But you didn't trust me enough to share this. I'm sorry, Hannah sobbed. I'm so sorry. Stephen looked at the woman on the bed again. Machines surrounded her, beeping softly, keeping her alive. An IV drip, a feeding tube, a heart monitor. Hannah had essentially created a private hospital room in their basement. How? Stephen asked. How have you managed this? The medical equipment, the care, everything. I was a nurse before we met, Hannah said. I know how to care for her, and I order supplies online. Medical equipment isn't hard to get if you know where to look. And the money? Stephen asked. This must cost a fortune. Hannah looked down. My father's life insurance. I've been using it to cover everything. Stephen paced the small space, trying to organize his thoughts. Does anyone else know? No one, Hannah said. You're the first person who's seen her in 7 years. The weight of that statement settled over Stephen. 7 years of secrets. 7 years of his wife living a double life. 7 years of wondering why certain rooms were off limits, why Hannah was sometimes distant, why she occasionally disappeared in the middle of the night. Hannah, this can't continue, Stephen said finally. We need to figure out what to do. What do you mean? Hannah's voice turned defensive. I'm not letting her go, Stephen. I can't. I'm not asking you to, Stephen said softly. But this, keeping her hidden like this, it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. For her or for you. Hannah sat back down beside her mother's bed, taking the woman's hand again. She's all I have left of my family, she whispered. If I let her go, I have nothing. Stephen knelt beside Hannah, placing his hand on her shoulder. You have me. You've always had me, but you never let me in. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sounds coming from the medical machines keeping Hannah's mother alive. Stephen studied the woman's face. She looked peaceful, almost as if she were simply sleeping. But her skin had a gray pallor that spoke of years without sunlight, years without consciousness. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm enjoying this story. Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. What was she like? Stephen asked softly. Before the accident. Hannah's face softened slightly. She was wonderful, kind, funny, full of life. She loved gardening. Every spring, she'd plant hundreds of flowers. Our yard was the most beautiful on the street. She sounds amazing, Stephen said. She was, Hannah replied. That's why I can't let go. Because the moment I do, she's truly gone. As long as she's breathing, there's still a part of her here. Stephen understood the logic, even if he didn't agree with it. Grief did strange things to people. It made them hold on when they should let go. It made them hide when they should seek help. "How often do you come down here?" Stephen asked. "Every day," Hannah admitted. "Usually when you're at work. But lately I've been coming at night too. I talk to her. I tell her about our life. I pretend she can hear me." "Maybe she can," Stephen said, though he didn't believe it. Hannah looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "Do you really think so?" Stephen didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to crush her hope. "I think love is powerful, and if anyone's love could reach someone, it's yours." Hannah leaned against him, and for the first time that night, Stephen put his arm around her. Despite the lies, despite the secrets, despite everything, she was still his wife, and she was clearly in pain. "What happens now?" Hannah asked. "I don't know," Stephen said honestly, "but we figure it out together." They sat there for hours, talking quietly while Hannah's mother lay motionless beside them. Hannah told Stephen everything. How she'd converted the basement 7 years ago, installing medical equipment and creating a care facility. How she'd learned to change IVs and feeding tubes. How she'd managed to keep everything hidden, even from him. As dawn approached, Stephen and Hannah finally climbed the stairs back to their bedroom. Neither of them spoke. What could be said? Everything had changed. The foundation of their marriage, which Stephen had thought was solid, had been built on a significant lie. But as he looked at Hannah, exhausted and vulnerable beside him, he realized something important. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to stay even when things got complicated. "I love you," Stephen said quietly. Hannah looked at him, surprise in her tired eyes. "After everything?" "After everything," Stephen confirmed. "But Hannah, we need help. Professional help. This situation, it's too big for us to handle alone." Hannah nodded slowly. "I know. I've always known. I was just too scared to admit it." They agreed to seek counseling, not just for Hannah, but for both of them. They also agreed that Hannah's mother needed proper medical oversight. Hiding her in the basement, no matter how well-intentioned, wasn't fair to anyone. Over the next few days, they began researching options: in-home healthcare, specialized facilities, anything that could provide proper care while respecting Hannah's desire to keep her mother close. But as they delved deeper into the situation, Stephen began noticing things that troubled him. Small inconsistencies in Hannah's story, strange sounds from the basement at odd hours, and most disturbing of all, the way Hannah's mother sometimes seemed to move, just barely, when she thought no one was watching. 3 days had passed since Stephen discovered the basement secret. 3 days of careful conversations, of walking on eggshells, of trying to process the impossible truth that his wife had been living a double life. But now, something else bothered him. Something Hannah had said didn't add up. It was Thursday afternoon. Stephen had taken the week off work, telling his boss there was a family emergency. That was the truth, even if his boss didn't know the full details. Hannah had gone to the grocery store, leaving Stephen alone in the house for the first time since his discovery. He sat in the living room, staring at the basement door, his mind racing with questions. Finally, he stood and walked downstairs. The basement door was locked again. Hannah had installed a new deadbolt, one that required a key. But Stephen had watched carefully when Hannah locked it that morning. He'd seen where she hid the key, behind a loose brick in the hallway wall. His hands trembled as he retrieved the key and unlocked the door. The basement was quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. He descended the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he reached the bottom, he approached the bed where Hannah's mother lay. In the soft light, Stephen studied her face more carefully than he had before. She was beautiful, despite the years of unconsciousness. Her hair, though gray, was neatly brushed. Her skin, though pale, was clean and well cared for. Hannah had clearly devoted herself to maintaining her mother's dignity. But as Stephen looked closer, he noticed something. The woman's eyelids fluttered, just slightly, but definitely a movement. Stephen's breath caught. He stepped closer, watching intently. There it was again, a tiny movement beneath the closed eyelids, as if she were dreaming. But Hannah had said her mother was in a vegetative state. No brain activity, no consciousness, no dreams. Stephen reached out, his hand hovering above the woman's arm. Should he touch her? Would it be wrong? Before he could decide, the woman's fingers moved. A slight twitch, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. Mrs. Morrison, Stephen whispered, using Hannah's maiden name. No response. The fingers went still. Stephen waited, watching. A full minute passed, then two. Nothing else moved. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe the stress of the past few days was making him see things that weren't there. He turned to leave, but then he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it. A whisper. Stephen spun around. The woman's lips had moved. Just barely, but they definitely moved. Mrs. Morrison, he said again, louder this time. Can you hear me? Silence. But her chest seemed to rise and fall more rapidly now. Her breathing had changed. Stephen pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Mrs. Morrison, if you can hear me, try to move your fingers again. Nothing happened for 10 seconds. 20. Then slowly, deliberately, her right index finger curled inward. Stephen's heart pounded. She could hear him. She was conscious. But if that was true, then Hannah had been lying about more than just keeping her mother alive. She'd been lying about her mother's condition. How long have you been conscious? Stephen asked. The woman's lips moved again, forming words without sound. Stephen leaned closer, his ear inches from her mouth. Help, she breathed. The word was barely audible, but Stephen heard it clearly. Help me. What do you mean? Stephen asked urgently. What's happening? Before she could answer, Stephen heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Hannah was home. His mind raced. Should he confront her now? Should he wait? Should he call someone? He didn't have time to decide. Footsteps approached the house. The front door opened. Stephen? Hannah called out. Are you home? Stephen stood quickly, moving toward the stairs. I'm down here, he called back, trying to keep his voice steady. He heard Hannah's footsteps stop. What are you doing in the basement? Her tone had changed, becoming sharp and suspicious. I just wanted to check on her, Stephen said, climbing the stairs. He met Hannah at the top, blocking her view of the basement. Make sure everything was okay. Hannah's eyes narrowed. I told you I'd handle it. You don't need to be down there. She's part of my family now, Stephen said carefully. I want to help. By invading the space I specifically asked you to stay out of? Hannah's voice rose. By going behind my back when I'm not home. Hannah, you kept your mother hidden from me for 7 years, Stephen said firmly. I think I'm entitled to want to understand what's happening. They stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Finally, Hannah pushed past him and descended into the basement. Stephen followed, his heart pounding. Hannah checked the machines first, examining the monitors and adjusting the IV drip. Then she leaned over her mother, studying her face. Did you touch her? Hannah asked without turning around. No, Stephen lied. I just sat and watched. Hannah straightened slowly. You're lying. What? Her blanket is different. I always position it a specific way. And the chair, you moved the chair. Stephen's stomach dropped. Hannah was more observant than he'd realized. Okay, yes. I sat next to her for a few minutes. Is that a crime? Did she respond to you? Hannah asked, her voice suddenly soft and dangerous. What? No. Hannah, she's in a vegetative state, remember? You said so yourself. Hannah turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She is in a vegetative state, Stephen. There's no consciousness, no awareness, nothing. Then why are you so worried about whether she responded to me? Hannah's jaw tightened. Because people don't understand. They see a twitch or a movement, and they think it means something. But it doesn't. It's just reflexes. The body reacting without the mind. How do you know for sure? Stephen pressed. Have you had her evaluated recently? By actual doctors? I am an actual medical professional, Hannah snapped. I know what I'm seeing. But you're not objective, Stephen said gently. You're her daughter. You want so badly for her to come back that you might be missing signs that she's not as far gone as you think. Hannah's face crumbled. Don't, she whispered. Don't give me hope. I can't handle hope. The raw pain in her voice broke Stephen's heart, but he couldn't stop now. Not after what he'd seen. Hannah, what if she's partially conscious? What if she's trapped, unable to fully wake up but aware enough to know what's happening? That would be worse, Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. Don't you see? If she's aware, even a little bit, then she's been suffering all these years, trapped in a body that won't respond. That's not hope, Stephen. That's torture. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm enjoying this story. Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. Stephen had no response to that. He'd been so focused on the possibility that Hannah's mother might be conscious that he hadn't considered the horror of what that would mean for her. We need to get her properly evaluated, Stephen said finally, by a neurologist, someone who can run tests and tell us exactly what's happening. No, Hannah said firmly. No doctors, no hospitals, no one else gets involved. Hannah, this is serious. If she's conscious, she needs proper care that you can't provide in a basement. I said no. Hannah's voice turned cold. This is my mother, my decision, and I'm telling you to stay out of it. They stood facing each other, the tension between them explosive. In all their years together, they'd never fought like this. Stephen had always been the peacemaker, willing to compromise and avoid conflict. But this was different. This was about a woman's life. I can't do that, Stephen said quietly. What? I can't just stand by and do nothing. Not if there's even a chance she's aware and suffering. Hannah's eyes widened with fury and fear. If you bring anyone into this, if you call a doctor or a hospital or anyone, I will never forgive you. And if I don't, and your mother is conscious and in pain, I'll never forgive myself. Hannah grabbed Stephen's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You don't understand what you're asking me to do. If doctors get involved, they'll take her away from me. They'll put her in a facility where I can only visit during designated hours. They'll run tests and procedures that will hurt her. And in the end, they'll probably recommend ending life support anyway. Or they might find a way to help her, Stephen countered. Medical science has advanced, Hannah. There might be treatments, therapies, something that could improve her condition. There's nothing, Hannah insisted. I've researched everything. Believe me, if there was hope, any hope at all, I would have found it years ago. Then why are you so afraid of letting doctors see her? Stephen asked. The question hung in the air. Hannah's grip on his arm loosened and she turned away. Because, she said softly, once I let them in, I lose control, and control is all I have left. Stephen's anger faded, replaced by deep sadness. He saw it clearly now. This wasn't just about keeping her mother alive. It was about Hannah's inability to accept loss, her desperate need to hold on to something, anything, that connected her to her past. Hannah, he said gently, you haven't lost control. You've been carrying an impossible burden alone for 15 years. Let me help you carry it. Hannah shook her head. You can't. No one can. I'm your husband, Stephen said. That means I'm supposed to try. They stood in silence, the machines beeping rhythmically around them. Finally, Hannah spoke. Give me 2 weeks. What? 2 weeks to figure things out, to come to terms with what needs to happen. Then we'll talk to a doctor together. Stephen considered her request. 2 weeks seemed reasonable, but something in Hannah's tone worried him. There was a finality to it, as if she were planning something. Promise me, Stephen said. Promise me you won't do anything drastic. No decisions without talking to me first. Hannah met his eyes, and for a moment, Stephen saw something that chilled him. A desperate determination that suggested she'd already made a decision she wasn't willing to share. I promise, Hannah said. But Stephen wasn't sure he believed her. That night, Stephen couldn't sleep. He lay in bed beside Hannah, listening to her breathe, wondering what she was thinking. Around 1 a.m., Hannah's breathing changed. It became too regular, too controlled. She was awake and pretending to sleep. Stephen waited. Sure enough, after 20 minutes, Hannah slipped out of bed. He kept his eyes closed, maintaining the pretense of sleep. He heard her leave the room, heard her footsteps on the stairs. He waited 5 minutes, then followed. The basement door was open. Stephen moved silently down the stairs, stopping halfway when he could see into the room without being seen. Hannah sat beside her mother's bed, but she wasn't alone. She held something in her hands, a syringe. Stephen's blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, Mom," Hannah whispered, "but I can't let them take you away from me. I can't let them hurt you with their tests and procedures. This is better. Peaceful. Quick." Stephen burst into motion, racing down the remaining stairs. "Hannah, no!" Hannah spun around, startled. The syringe fell from her hands, clattering on the floor. "Stephen," she gasped, "I thought you were asleep." "What are you doing?" Stephen demanded, his voice shaking. "What is in that syringe?" Hannah looked down at the fallen syringe, then back at Stephen. Her face was eerily calm. "It's morphine," she said quietly. "Enough to let her go peacefully. Enough to finally end her suffering and mine." "You were going to kill her," Stephen said, the words feeling surreal even as he spoke them. "I was going to give her peace," Hannah corrected. "There's a difference." "No, there isn't," Stephen said firmly. "Hannah, this is murder. You can't do this." "I can, and I was," Hannah said, her voice hardening, "until you interrupted." Stephen moved between Hannah and the bed, positioning himself as a physical barrier. "I won't let you." "She's my mother," Hannah said. "Not yours. You have no right to interfere." "I have every right," Stephen shot back. "I'm your husband, and I won't let you destroy your life like this, because that's what you'd be doing. The moment you inject that morphine, your life as you know it is over." "My life is already over," Hannah said bitterly. "It ended the day of my mother's accident. Everything since then has just been going through the motions." "That's not true," Stephen said. "What about us? What about our marriage? Doesn't that mean anything?" "Of course it does," Hannah said, tears forming in her eyes. "But you don't understand. Every day I wake up knowing my mother is down here, trapped in a body that doesn't work. Every day I wonder if she's aware, if she's suffering, if she's begging for release in a voice no one can hear. I can't live with that anymore." "Then let's get her help," Stephen pleaded. "Real help, not this." "Help means giving her up," Hannah said, "and I'm not ready for that." "You'll never be ready," Stephen said gently. "That's why you have to choose to do it anyway." They stood facing each other, both crying now, both at the end of their emotional ropes. The woman on the bed lay silent between them, unaware of the battle being fought over her fate. Or was she? In that moment, as Stephen and Hannah argued, neither of them noticed the woman's eyes. They had opened, just slightly, barely a crack, but they were open, and they were watching. Stephen saw it first. His words trailed off mid-sentence as his gaze shifted past Hannah to the bed. "Hannah," he whispered, "look." Hannah turned, following his gaze. Her mouth fell open. Her mother's eyes were open. Not fully, but unmistakably open. And they were moving, tracking from Hannah to Stephen and back again. "Mom?" Hannah breathed, moving closer to the bed. "Mom, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes focused on Hannah. Slowly, painfully slowly, her lips moved. "Chill." The word was barely a whisper, rough and unused but clear. Hannah collapsed to her knees beside the bed, sobbing. "Oh my God. Oh my God, you're awake. You can hear me." Stephen stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. For 15 years, this woman had been in a vegetative state, and now, at this crucial moment, she was waking up. Was it coincidence? Or had she been conscious all along, trapped and unable to respond until now? "How long?" Stephen asked, his voice shaking. "Mrs. Morrison, how long have you been aware?" The woman's eyes moved to Stephen. Her lips worked, forming words that took effort. Al-ways. The word hit like a bomb. Hannah's head snapped up. What? No! No, that's not possible. You've been in a vegetative state. The doctors said there was no brain activity. Tours. Wrong, the woman whispered. Each word seemed to exhaust her. Hannah looked at Stephen, her face a mask of horror. She's been conscious this whole time? All 15 years? I don't know, Stephen said, but we need to call an ambulance. Now. No, the woman said, her voice slightly stronger. No, hospital. Mom, you need help, Hannah said desperately. You need proper medical care. Had 15 years in bed, the woman said slowly. No more hospitals. Hannah looked at Stephen, lost and terrified. What do we do? We respect her wishes, Stephen said, though uncertainty filled his voice. But we get a doctor here, someone who can evaluate her properly. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm enjoying this story. Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. The woman's hand moved, reaching for Hannah. Hannah took it, holding it tightly. Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping. I thought I was keeping you safe. You were, the woman said. Thank you for not letting go. But you've been trapped, Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. Trapped in your own body, aware of everything but unable to respond. That's torture. The woman shook her head slightly, a movement that seemed to take enormous effort. Not trapped. Waiting. Waiting for what? Stephen asked. This, the woman said. Her eyes moved between Hannah and Stephen. You two together. Strong enough. Now. Hannah's brow furrowed. I don't understand. The woman's breathing became more labored. Speaking was clearly exhausting her. You need support. Had to wait for right person. She looked at Stephen. You're good, man. Stephen felt tears forming in his own eyes. This woman had been conscious for 15 years, unable to move or speak, and she'd been waiting for Hannah to find someone strong enough to help her through what was coming. Mom, what are you saying? Hannah asked, her voice breaking. The woman squeezed Hannah's hand weakly. Time to let go. But couldn't until you weren't alone. No, Hannah said firmly. No, you're awake now. We can work on recovery. Physical therapy, speech therapy, everything. We'll get you better. The woman shook her head again. Body done. Waited too long. But mind free now. Can say goodbye. I'm not ready, Hannah sobbed. I'll never be ready. I know, but time. The woman's voice was fading. Each word took more effort than the last. Love you, Rachel. So proud. Stephen moved closer, placing his hand on Hannah's shoulder. This was the moment Hannah had been running from for 15 years. The moment she'd built a hidden hospital in their basement to avoid. The moment she'd lied and kept secrets to prevent. And now it was here, unavoidable and heartbreaking. Don't go, Hannah whispered. Please don't go. Have to, the woman said. Tired, so tired. Her eyes closed briefly, then opened again with visible effort. Eel. Yes, ma'am, Stephen said, moving closer. Take care of her. Help her live, not just survive. I will, Stephen promised. I swear I will. The woman smiled slightly, the first real expression they'd seen cross her face. Good. Her breathing became shallower. Rachel. I'm here, Mom. Let me rest now, please. Hannah's whole body shook with sobs. I can't. You can. You're strongest person. I know. The machines around them began to beep differently. The heart monitor showed an irregular rhythm. Hannah looked at the monitor, her nurse training automatically kicking in despite her emotional state. Her heart is failing, she said, her voice clinical even through the tears. We need to do something. No, Stephen said gently. We need to let her go. I can save her, Hannah said desperately, reaching for the emergency equipment she kept nearby. I can start CPR. I can. Stephen caught her arm. Hannah, look at her. Hannah turned back to her mother. The woman's face was peaceful, more peaceful than it had been in years. Her eyes had closed again, but this time it looked like she was simply falling asleep. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath softer than the last. She's ready, Stephen said softly. She's been ready for a long time. She was just waiting for you to be ready too. Hannah collapsed against Stephen, her hands still holding her mother's. I'm not ready. I'll never be ready. I know, Stephen said, wrapping his arms around his wife. But you're going to do it anyway, because you love her. They stood there, holding each other and holding the dying woman's hand. The beeping of the machine slowed. The woman's breathing became almost imperceptible. And then, quietly, gently, the beeping stopped. The woman's chest stopped moving. The monitors showed flat lines. Hannah let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. It was pure grief. 15 years of repressed emotion finally breaking free. Stephen held her as she cried, his own tears falling silently. After a while, Hannah pulled away. She moved to her mother's bed and gently closed the woman's eyes, smoothed her hair, arranged her blanket. Her movements were tender and practiced, the movements of someone who had cared for this person with unwavering devotion for 15 years. She's at peace now, Stephen said quietly. Hannah nodded, unable to speak. They stayed in the basement for hours. Neither wanted to leave. Finally, as dawn light began to filter through the small basement windows, Stephen spoke. We need to call someone. An ambulance, the police, someone. Hannah stiffened. Will they arrest me? I don't know, Stephen said honestly. Probably not. You were caring for your mother with her implied consent, and now she's passed naturally. But we need to report it properly. Hannah looked at him with red, swollen eyes. Will you stay with me? Through everything, Stephen promised. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Hannah took a deep breath and nodded. Stephen made the call. Within an hour, their house was filled with people. Paramedics confirmed what they already knew. The police asked questions but were sympathetic. A detective arrived and asked more detailed questions about the basement setup and how long the woman had been there. Hannah answered everything honestly. She told them about the car accident 15 years ago, about her father's death, about bringing her mother home 7 years ago. She told them about the medical equipment, the daily care routine, everything. The detective listened carefully. Miss Bell, what you did is highly unusual. Keeping someone in a home medical setup for years without professional oversight raises concerns. I know, Hannah said quietly, but she was my mother. I couldn't let her go. I understand, the detective said, but we're going to need to investigate this fully. There will be an autopsy. Medical records will be reviewed. The district attorney's office will decide if charges are warranted. Stephen squeezed Hannah's hand. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Over the next few weeks, the investigation proceeded. Medical examiners confirmed that the woman had died of natural causes, specifically heart failure related to her long-term medical condition. Crucially, they found no evidence of abuse or neglect. In fact, the examiners noted that the woman had been exceptionally well cared for. Hannah's father's old medical records were obtained, confirming the original car accident and initial prognosis. Neurologists reviewed the case and theorized that the woman had likely been in a minimally conscious state rather than a vegetative state, explaining her final moments of awareness. In the end, no charges were filed. The district attorney's office concluded that while Hannah's actions were unconventional and not recommended, they didn't constitute a crime. She had provided continuous, competent medical care to her mother based on what she believed were her mother's wishes. But the ordeal left its mark on Hannah and Stephen's marriage. Trust, once broken, doesn't repair overnight. "I'm going to therapy," Hannah announced one morning, 3 weeks after her mother's funeral. "I need help dealing with all of this." "I think that's a good idea," Stephen said. "Would you want me to come with you?" Hannah looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. "Would you?" "Of course," Stephen said. "We're in this together, remember?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "After everything I put you through, you still want to be with me?" "Hannah, you lied to me. You kept huge secrets. You broke my trust in ways I'm still processing," Stephen said honestly. "But I also understand why you did it. You were grieving and desperate and trying to hold on to the last piece of your family. That doesn't excuse it, but it helps me understand it." "I don't deserve you," Hannah whispered. "Maybe not," Stephen said with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." They started couples therapy the following week. It was hard, painful work. Hannah had to learn to communicate openly instead of hiding her struggles. Stephen had to learn to watch for signs that Hannah was struggling, instead of assuming everything was fine. Slowly, over months, they began to heal. The basement was cleaned out. All the medical equipment was donated to a local hospice. The walls were repainted. Eventually, they transformed the space into something new, an art studio for Hannah. "I need a creative outlet," she explained to Stephen. "Something beautiful to fill that space that was filled with so much sadness." If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm enjoying this story." Let's see who's truly following this beautiful story. Hannah took up painting. She wasn't very good at first, but she didn't care. The act of creating something, of turning blank canvases into colorful expressions of emotion, was therapeutic. Her first painting hung in their living room. It showed a woman standing at the edge of a cliff looking out at the ocean. Behind her, a hand reached out, offering support. "That's us," Hannah explained to Stephen. "Me at the edge, and you making sure I don't fall." "I'll always be there," Stephen promised. 1 year after her mother's death, Hannah organized a proper memorial service. It was small, just close friends and a few distant relatives who didn't know about the hidden basement years. Hannah gave a beautiful eulogy, talking about her mother's strength, her kindness, and her final act of love, waiting until Hannah had support before letting go. After the service, Hannah and Stephen stood at the gravesite alone. "I need to tell you something," Hannah said quietly. "Okay," Stephen said, bracing himself. "In those final moments when my mom was dying, I understood something. She wasn't suffering all those years. She was at peace. Being conscious or unconscious didn't matter. What mattered was that she was surrounded by love." Stephen listened. "I kept her alive because I was scared of being alone," Hannah continued. "But I wasn't honoring her life. I was postponing my grief. And in doing so, I almost destroyed our marriage and my own life." "Almost," Stephen emphasized. "But you didn't. We came through it. Because of you," Hannah said. "Because you didn't give up on me even when you probably should have." "For better or worse, remember?" Stephen said, referencing their wedding vows. "I meant those words." Hannah took his hand. "So did I. But I understand them better now. The worse isn't about external problems. It's about the struggles we carry inside ourselves. And the better is having someone who'll stand beside you while you fight those struggles." They walked back to their car hand in hand. The basement door, once locked and forbidden, now stayed open. The space that had held secrets and sadness now held creation and hope. And Hannah, who had spent 15 years unable to let go, had finally learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is releasing what you can't save. 6 months later, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. The news was unexpected, overwhelming, and perfect. "A new beginning," she said to Stephen, holding the positive pregnancy test. "The best kind," Stephen agreed. Their daughter was born on a sunny spring morning. They named her Grace after Hannah's mother. She would have loved this, Hannah said, holding baby Grace for the first time. She waited all those years to make sure I wouldn't be alone. And now look at us, a family. Stephen looked at his wife and daughter, his heart full. The basement that had once held such darkness now held Hannah's art studio, where she created beautiful things. The house that had once been filled with secrets now echoed with a baby's cries and laughter. And the marriage that had nearly broken under the weight of lies had been rebuilt on a foundation of hard-won honesty and deeper understanding. Sometimes Stephen still thought about that night, standing at the basement door, hearing his wife cry in the forbidden room below. He thought about the choice he'd made to open that door, to discover the truth, to insist on facing reality no matter how painful. He'd been terrified of what he might find, and what he'd found had indeed changed everything, but not in the way he'd feared. He'd found his wife's deepest pain. He'd found her greatest secret. He'd found the burden she'd been carrying alone for years. And in finding all of that, he'd found the opportunity to truly become her partner, not just in joy, but in sorrow, not just in easy times, but in impossible ones. The basement door that had once been locked was now just a door. The secret that had nearly destroyed their marriage had become the story of how they'd survived their greatest test. And Hannah, who had once believed she couldn't live without keeping her mother alive, had learned that love doesn't end with death. It transforms, it evolves, but it never truly disappears. Every time she painted in the basement studio, every time she held baby Grace, every time she looked at Stephen and felt grateful for his unwavering support, she felt her mother's love surrounding her. Some secrets are meant to be kept. Some doors are meant to stay locked. But some secrets, no matter how painful, need to see the light. And some doors, no matter how frightening, need to be opened. Because behind them isn't always disaster. Sometimes, behind them is the truth that sets us free. Dear viewers, what powerful lessons did you take away from Stephen and Hannah's heartbreaking journey? This story reminds us that secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, can destroy the very relationships we're trying to protect. Love isn't about hiding our pain from others. It's about trusting them enough to share it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything? How did you handle it? Share your experiences with our community. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with friends who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our compelling stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, the strongest relationships are built not on perfection, but on honest vulnerability and unwavering support. Stay blessed, and see you in the next story.